It was a quiet morning at Benny's Diner, the kind of old-school roadside place that still smelled of bacon grease and brewed coffee. The clock ticked past 7:15 a.m. when George, an 81-year-old man with silver hair and kind blue eyes, wiped down the counter for the third time. He'd been working at this diner since his wife passed 10 years ago. It wasn't about the money anymore, it was about staying busy, staying useful, and having people to talk to. The regulars knew him well. Truckers, early risers, and cops passing through. Everyone respected old George. He had that quiet strength, the kind that comes from decades of hard living and hard choices. No one ever guessed that this frail-looking old man had once served in the military, that he had seen war and loss up close. That morning, the bell above the diner door jingled, and a man walked in. He was tall, mid-30s, with tattoos crawling up his neck and a scowl that could sour milk. He wore a leather jacket with a skull emblem and heavy boots that thudded on the tiled floor. George noticed him immediately, not because he was new, but because of the way he looked around. Not like a customer, like a predator. The man sat at the counter, slamming his hands down. "Coffee?" he barked. George smiled politely. "Sure thing, son." He poured the coffee slowly, steady hands despite the tremor that had been with him for years. The thug watched him like he wanted to start trouble. Maybe he was bored, maybe he wanted someone to push back. When George slid the coffee toward him, the man sneered. "Took you long enough, old man." George nodded, not wanting to stir anything up. "Sorry about that, pot was fresh." The man took a sip and grimaced. "Tastes like dirt. You call this coffee?" George didn't answer. He'd learned long ago, some men didn't want conversation, they wanted control. The thug kicked his stool back, standing up. The other customers looked up from their plates, sensing the tension. "Hey," said one trucker from the corner, "take it easy, pal. He's just doing his job." The thug shot him a glare. "You wanna say that again, fat boy?" The trucker looked away. Nobody wanted to deal with a fight this early. George sighed. "Listen, son, why don't you sit down and finish your drink? No harm done." The man stepped closer until he was just inches from George. "Don't, son, me, old man." And then, the sound of a slap cracked through the diner. It echoed like a gunshot. George staggered, hand to his cheek, his coffee pot clattering to the floor. The room froze. The thug grinned, proud of himself. "Yeah, that's what I thought. Maybe next time, you'll learn some respect." For a moment, the only sound was the drip of spilled coffee hitting the tiles. Then, the bell above the door jingled again. A young woman walked in, dressed in a dark jacket and jeans, her hair pulled into a tight bun. She moved with calm precision, every step quiet but deliberate. Her eyes scanned the room instantly, like she was assessing a threat. When she saw George holding his cheek, her face changed. The calm vanished, replaced by a silent storm. "Dad," she said softly, her voice steady but dangerous. The thug turned, laughing. "Oh, great, family reunion. You the waitress or what?" She didn't answer. She just stepped closer, eyes locked on him. "Did you hit him?" The thug smirked. "What if I did?" The girl took another step. Now the sunlight from the window caught the badge-shaped patch on her sleeve, small but unmistakable. The emblem of the Delta Force. The man's grin faltered. "Wait, what is that?" She didn't bother to explain. "I asked you a question," she said, voice calm but low. "Did you hit my father?" The thug tried to puff himself up again, though a flicker of fear crept into his voice. "Hey," he mouthed. "Off first." "Wrong answer," she said. And before anyone could blink, she moved. A blur of motion, one arm swept his legs out, the other twisted his wrist until he yelped in pain. He hit the ground hard, gasping. She stepped over him, her boot pressing lightly against his chest. The whole diner was dead silent. George blinked, still processing what was happening. "Lydia, honey, don't." She looked up, her expression softening only for him. "He hit you, Dad." "I'm fine," George said, rubbing his jaw. "Don't make a mess over me." The thug tried to get up, but she pressed harder with her boot, keeping him pinned. "Apologize to him," she ordered. Are you crazy?" He stammered. "Apologize." He wheezed as she shifted her weight slightly. I'm sorry, old man." She stepped back, letting him crawl to his feet. He grabbed his jacket and stumbled toward the door, muttering curses under his breath. But before he could leave, she spoke again. "If you ever touch him or anyone like him again, you won't get a warning next time." The man looked back, saw the steel in her eyes, and ran. Silence filled the diner again. The other customers looked at George, then at Lydia. One man clapped quietly, another followed. Soon the diner was filled with soft applause. George sighed, shaking his head. You didn't have to do that, you know. Lydia smiled faintly. Maybe not, but it felt good. He chuckled, then winced slightly. Still, I think you scared half the customers. Good, she said, sitting beside him. They should know not to mess with you. He looked at her for a moment. His daughter, the little girl he used to carry on his shoulders, now a warrior in her own right. Pride filled his chest. When did you get back? Last night, she said. Didn't have time to call. They just wrapped the mission. He nodded slowly. You always did have a way of making an entrance. She laughed quietly. Guess it runs in the family. They sat there in comfortable silence for a moment. The waitress brought her coffee and a plate of pancakes without asking. Everyone in the diner seemed to look at Lydia differently now, not just as a soldier, but as a daughter defending her father. George sipped his coffee, eyes distant. You know, I thought after your mom passed, I'd never see anyone fight for me again. I was wrong. Lydia smiled softly. You fought for me my whole life, Dad. I'm just returning the favor. He nodded, eyes misty but proud. Still, I wish you didn't have to see me like this. Old, slow, getting slapped around by some punk. Hey, she said, reaching over and placing her hand on his. You're the strongest man I know. That slap doesn't change anything. George chuckled. You sure about that? My cheek disagrees. She laughed. You'll live. For the first time that morning, the diner felt warm again. Conversations resumed. The cook called out orders. The smell of fresh bacon filled the air once more. But outside, in the parking lot, the thug wasn't done. He paced beside his car, furious and humiliated. He made a quick phone call. Yeah, she's some kind of soldier. Bring the boys. We'll teach them both a lesson. Inside, Lydia noticed the movement through the window. Her instincts kicked in instantly. She stood, setting down her coffee. What's wrong? George asked. Trouble, she said simply. Before he could respond, 3 men walked in, all rough-looking, leather jackets, heavy boots. The thug from earlier pointed toward Lydia. That's her. The diner went silent again. Lydia sighed. You just don't learn, do you? The first man lunged toward her, swinging. She ducked, grabbed his arm, and used his momentum to flip him onto the counter. Plates shattered. The second man tried to grab her from behind, but she elbowed him in the ribs and sent him stumbling into a booth. The third pulled a knife, but before he could strike, George stepped forward with the coffee pot, and smashed it right across the man's hand. The customers gasped. Lydia glanced at her dad, half amused. Guess you still got some fight left. He grinned. You taught me well. Within seconds, the 3 men were down. The thug from earlier backed away slowly, eyes wide. You people are crazy. Lydia pointed to the door. Leave, and tell whoever sent you, don't come back. He didn't need to be told twice. The men scrambled out, limping, bleeding, and defeated. George looked around at the chaos, broken plates, spilled coffee, overturned chairs. Well, he said, there goes my quiet morning. Lydia smiled. I'll help you clean up. Deal, he said with a laugh. As they worked side by side, the sun broke through the clouds outside, casting a soft golden glow through the diner's windows. The place felt peaceful again, like it always had, before trouble came knocking. When they finally sat down, George looked at her thoughtfully. You know, I think your mom would have loved this. Lydia chuckled. You mean watching her daughter beat up 3 guys in a diner? He smiled. No, watching her daughter take care of her old man. She looked at him, eyes soft. I'll always take care of you, Dad. He reached across the table, holding her hand. And I'll always be proud of you, no matter what you do. The bell above the door jingled again. A couple of new customers walked in, laughing, oblivious to the battle that had just taken place. Lydia and George shared a quiet smile. Life moved on. The world outside didn't know what had happened in that little diner on the edge of town. But inside, something sacred had been reaffirmed, that no matter how old, how fragile, or how small you may seem, love and loyalty can still stand tall against cruelty. And sometimes, when fate allows, justice walks through the door, wearing the uniform of a soldier and the heart of a daughter.